Well, from the readings that Bob did this morning, you had a sense of who's really in charge. And in case we ever forget it, God speaking to Job let us know that he is the one who makes the world and the universe turn. But with this reading this morning, if we're really honest with ourselves, we have to admit that we might identify more with James and John in our feelings about greatness. Most of us like to be recognized for the good things that we do. But I think that of people who've left a mark on my life that's unforgettable, it's people who've made unconditional goodness such a part of their lives that they don't even recognize it. It's love without fanfare. What Jesus is asking of us here is to make our goal in life to be last, not first, to be a servant to others. And if we're honest, most of us have kind of a negative reaction to the word servant. It's not the kind of thing we'd like to fill out on a resume as our last occupation. Servant. I have to admit, though, that word reminds me of family. You see, I'm the great-granddaughter of indentured servants, household servants who came to New Jersey, who paid for their voyage from Ireland with their freedom given away for a few years. So, Jesus says, you must be a servant. You must be last, not first. Now, if there ever was a goal, it's absolutely the opposite of what people these days strive to achieve in American culture. It's this. The Episcopal blogger, Father Michael Marsh, whose ideas I used a great deal today, said, have you ever seen a football team celebrating at the end, the one that came in second, going, we are second, we are second? Don't think so. In our culture, only number one counts because of the power it gives. Recently, we've been surrounded by a few people that I don't need to name, who tell us that we must make America great, or how great they are personally. And leaving aside the obvious, I wonder how many of you remember a certain young man who said something back in the 1964, and 64 was very similar. Reverend Galen Russell of Christ Church in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania, shared this little clip, and I'm going to read it to you, of this young celebrity talking about himself. I want everybody to bear witness, I am the greatest. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived. I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I showed the world. I talk to God every day. I know the real God. I shook up the world. I'm the king of the world. You must listen to me. I am the greatest. I can't be beat. But the passage of time and being touched by his own mortality and his fighting-induced Parkinson's disease changed this young man's viewpoint. That man, of course, was Muhammad Ali, who learned as he lived. In 2005, he said this about greatness. Wouldn't it be a wonderful world if just 10% of the people who believe in the power of love would compete with one another to see who could do the most good for the most people? When I think of Ali now, in my mind's eye, I still see him in the Atlanta Olympics in '95, haltingly climbing the stairs in the Olympic Stadium to light that cauldron. You see, he learned, and we all have to come to know That being great isn't about big wins. It's about the small stuff. Servanthood. Reverend Janet Hunt, a first Lutheran in DeKalb, Illinois, says servanthood and serving doesn't come naturally. Why? Because in these days of anxiety and uncertainty, it's much easier to embrace the idea that we have to win at all costs. You know, the world tries to persuade us otherwise from being servants. What it tries to tell us is it's that kill or be killed attitude we find coming at us, even for entertainment. Tim and I were talking this week. It's that dystopian view of the world that we find in the Hunger Games or in endless zombie movies, and in the last few weeks, in the Squid Game. I'm not going to tell you what that is, and I don't suggest you watch it. There's nothing that could be further from Christ's concept of hope and forgiveness than the constant diet of violence and pointlessness we are feeding ourselves. And worse than that, we're feeding our young people who are committing acts of violence and increasing the number of suicides in this country. And we wonder why. You see, God's goal of life is not about wins and losses. Great people don't even think about wins and losses. They just do good. All they see is a person in need, even if that need is small, and they step up to make that person whole, to feel respected. And decades ago, when I was a hospital administrator at St. Joseph's Medical Center in Yonkers, I needed to have an x-ray. And I was put in one of those, in a cold room with one of those wonderful gowns that opens up the back. And they left me sitting on a cold table all by myself. And I was there for a good half an hour. And after about a half an hour, the door opened, and in came a housekeeper to drop off some towels. And she saw me sitting there, and she recognized me as somebody who needed her. She said to me, "Sweetheart, they're going to take great care of you. These are wonderful people. I'll say a prayer for you." And then she left. She didn't know that I was some big mucky muck in administration. She had no idea who I was. And frankly, she didn't care. All she knew is that I looked lost, and she wanted to help. She was a great person. The fact is, we tend to think of servanthood as an occupation, as Father Marsh says to us. An occupation, as he said, for the poor and uneducated, minorities and foreigners, and those we can get away with paying less than a living wage. Being last and servant is not what we strive for. But Jesus asks us, what does it mean and look like for you and me to be great in God's world today? That's the question. Now, Jesus always brings up, very often, the need to become like a little child. And it's not always the reason that he does that we might expect. Father Michael says Jesus is not saying that greatness is in being a child, and he doesn't say that greatness is in being childlike. What he says is greatness is in welcoming the child. The child's a symbol for something else. The child is a symbol of vulnerability, powerlessness, and dependency. The child in Jesus' day had no rights, no status, no economic value, because the child was a consumer and not a producer. Greatness, Jesus says, is in welcoming and receiving into our arms someone regardless of his or her age or situation. Greatness is not found in what we have accomplished and gained for ourselves, but in what we have done and given to the least of these, the hungry, the thirsty, naked, sick, and imprisoned, the symbolic children in each of our lives. Greatness never puts itself in a position of superiority over another, ever. It's not about me, my nation, my tribe, my people, my religion, my politics, my bank account, my house, my job, my accomplishments, my reputation, my status. Our greatness is revealed in our service and care of others, regardless of their ability to or willingness to pay, repay, or return the favor. I might add that being in love with a great person can also require the patience of a saint from the person living with them. Reverend Mert Rim, whom you've heard me mention before, is a mentor of mine. And he was someone who sought out the lost and brought them home to his own table quite frequently, especially on Thanksgiving. We were one of the people he used to bring home. His long-suffering wife, Jackie, was used to Mert bringing home, as in particular, one of our church members who was an alcoholic but not in recovery. Each Thanksgiving, Mert would bring Bill to dinner, where more often than not, Bill would just sit and cry and cry and cry over dinner. So one year, bringing Bill to dinner was even more complicated because in one of his drunken stupors, he fell and broke both legs. So we literally had to lug Bill up the stairs, and Jackie was a trooper all that time, no matter how disruptive Thanksgiving dinner would be. You know, on the other hand, sometimes the sacrifices made by great people can seem amazingly small, and this is very personal for me. Back in 1985, when I found, after 5 surgeries, that we could never have children, the one thing we all wanted more than anything else, my best friend, Alex Rapatsky, didn't ask me. She just told me that I was going to her house, and she picked me up from the hospital and took me to her house. And then she had the 2 of us sit there and make chocolate candy. It turned out to be the most awful tasting chocolate candy I've ever had before, but it was also the sweetest because its main ingredient was that love I mentioned, love without fanfare. As Reverend Galen says, there's a saying about successful people that I also believe is very true. And I would hold on to this. What you focus on grows. And what you think about expands. And what you dwell upon determines your destiny. Determines your destiny. If you make the choice to look on the greatness in others, however small the kindness, this is what will multiply in your life. Kindness. If, on the other hand, you let fear and anxiety twist your vision so you think that other people have to lose for you to win, then you are buying a future that could be an apocalyptic hell on earth. Remember all those people in your life that you consider great. After whom will you care in your life? The choice is yours. Amen.